And we have some breaking news coming in. Now, three Uyghur brothers who escaped China and sought refuge in Kashmir back in 2013 now face deportation by India. Now, Center for Uyghur Studies has appealed to the government of India to take a reasonable stand and not deport Uyghurs back to China. The Uyghur siblings have remained imprisoned since their arrival. Abdul Hakim Idris, who's the executive director of Center for Uyghur Studies, has spoken exclusively to News 18. Listen in.
And this is a CNN News 18 exclusive. The Center for Uyghur Studies has appealed to the government of India to take a reasonable stand and not to deport Uyghurs back to China. They have appealed to the Indian government to release three Uyghur siblings detained since 2013. These three Uyghur siblings fled to Kashmir from China's persecution and have been under the custody of the Indian immigration authorities since 2013. Now, Abdul Hakim Idris, Executive Director of the Center of Uyghur Studies, is joining us on the broadcast. Thank you, Mr. Idris, for joining us on CNN News 18. Can you take us through the circumstances surrounding the detention of these three siblings?
Thank you for giving us the opportunity and highlighting this issue. Those siblings fled the country 2013. If you go back, at that time, the Chinese Communist government was using and still using struck hard policy, which means kill first, then report later. And at that time, many young people from East Turkestan, Uyghur people, were detained and harshly, sentenced for prison or for death and transported in the inner China. Those the three siblings, they fled this hell from Chinese Communist government to India. We are talking from just three Uyghurs. As you know, India right now hosted 100,000 refugees from Afghanistan to Rohingya to Tibetan. I think these three Uyghurs almost 10 years right now in Indian custody, and the Indian authorities, government, and the courts should let them free and leave them in freedom. And I think this is what we want to highlight at these circumstances.
Right. And Mr. Idris, but when it comes to the security concerns surrounding, infiltration of Uyghur groups from China into India, those concerns are also very much there. How do you feel India should address that? Because there is, on one side, there are the compassionate grounds that every country, every signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that India has signed as well. One is the commitments for that. The second are the security concerns and the security paradigm that is raised when it comes to immigration from that part of the world. How should India address that?
India should, as a neighboring country for the Uyghur people, is Turkestan. We are neighbors. Thousands years, and something's happened bad to us. We fled to India. And in earlier times, many from Kashmiri people come to our countries. And as a neighbors, when the circumstances, as is like today, the genocide is occurring, the Chinese government put on more than 1.3 million Chinese cadres in every Uyghur family and turning every Uyghur family to a prisons. And besides, they're putting the more than 3 million Uyghurs in concentration camps and sterilization and the more separating millions of Uyghur children from their parents. India should be prepared as a neighboring country and stand up for its value. And, I think it's 10 years already time to check their security. Today, we cannot, talk about this, the security. It's dangerous for the Indian governments. And if you look, it's nothings. Three people from East Turkestan just fled last 10 years to India, while in East Turkestan going on is a hell. And everybody, losing their freedom, their dignity, and they are not able to flee the country to neighboring countries. We know Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, even Pakistan, even the Taliban before, they sent some Uyghur refugees from that area back to China. We don't know what happened to them. And Thailand sent almost 2014 more than 100 Uyghurs to China. We don't know what's happened to them. So you cannot send those 3 Uyghurs into China. If you send them, that will be happen what happened before, who sent it back to China, and this is death and disappearance, and we don't know nobody from them. I think this is we can understand the security circumstances, but it's as an Indian neighboring country for Uyghur people, for East Turkestan should take action and prepare and leave those Uyghurs for free.
Right. So in your opinion, the humanitarian crisis is above any security paradigm that might emerge from this. My final question to you, Mr. Idris, is that when it comes to the persecution of Uyghurs in China, currently it's very difficult for anyone from any part of the world to get actual information about what is happening inside the Chinese mainland. Decode for us the kind of crackdown that the Uyghurs are facing inside China.
Unfortunately, Chinese communist government conducting genocide on Uyghurs. It's worse than Nazi Germany. It's worse than Imperial Japan did to the Chinese. But those countries kept the records. But China destroying records. They letting no evidence. They building crematorium front after the concentration camps. They burning the bodies, letting the people disappear. You cannot ask about your family or your loved one. And today there are going on sanitizations and the mass rape and the letting the Uyghur women for the Han Chinese communists to marry forcefully. That's going on there. And every family has fear. And you know what? Those 3 guys still lucky. They are alive, right? They're in India. They lost their freedom almost 10 years in India, but they are still alive. We can talk about them. But many their people in their age right now in East Turkestan, there are from Kargilak. Kargilak is not too far from Kashmir region. It's side from Kashmir. It's a neighbor. What they do if they feel their life is in danger, they flee. And Indian authority had enough time to investigate them. And today, the court's verdict is, to send them back to China. It will be shame on India to send them back to China, as a neighboring country, big country, democratic country, and with the universal value of human rights and democracy, and sending them back to China. Indian will be with those countries who sent the Uyghurs before in the same page. I think it is for Indian authority to think about and let them freeze immediately.
Right. Mr. Abdul Hakim Idris, thank you for joining us on CNN News 18 and sharing your perspective when it comes to the humanitarian outreach to Uyghur Muslims.
So that was Abdul Hakim Idris, who's the Executive Director of Center for Uyghur Studies, speaking on the 3 Uyghur brothers that escaped from China to Kashmir back in 2013.